Thank you guys so much for attending my PL session, especially on a Friday. I know that is a sacrifice, but it is the 3rd out of 4th, so I kind of switched the dates around just to make it a little bit easier for us. So obviously Tuesday we had data talks, so that's why we rescheduled to today. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and do the last session next Friday on our PL day. So I'll do it in the morning, just on the off chance we get let out early. That won't influence anything, because Ringfeld said that we don't have anything planned like for the day for the school. So I know Jones has to go off-site for U.S. History PL session. I think special ed might have some, but hopefully we'll be able to get it done first thing in the morning, and that will be my last session. So my first 2 sessions focused on historical documents and sourcing, and it was really just through a social studies lens. These 2 sessions, however, were kind of scaffolded upon those sourcing sessions we did the first time, but this is more open to other departments because it's kind of just the basis of learning how to use sources and from any more modern sources for any topic or any content area. So we're going to talk about online civic reasoning today for research and academics, so basically how to use it within school for our scholars. And then next session, the last one, would be more about citizenship and life skills, so how they would basically dealing more of how as just people in the world, they know what to believe, especially when they're inundated with TikTok and Instagram and all kinds of stuff and not always truthful. So what is online civic reasoning? So as you can tell by this point, I really like the SHEG, the Stanford History Education Group. I think they're super helpful, and they offer great activities that act kind of as interventions. So we talked about how to use them for sourcing activities and how they're kind of scaffolded. They provide documents. They provide all kinds of stuff as we go on, and they actually identify what skills the students are going to use. Well, they have another part of their organization that's called CORE, Civic Online Reasoning. So I really focus heavily using their information for these next 2 because I feel like it's so applicable. So according to the SHEG core curriculum, civic online reasoning is the ability to judge the credibility of the information that floods smartphones, tablets, and computer screens. And it uses 3 main questions here. Who's behind the information? What is the evidence? And what do other sources say? So these questions are kind of a condensed version of what we used when we talked about sourcing and happy charts and soapstone and IREAD protocol, all that kind of stuff. So it kind of just condenses it down to have kids ask themselves these questions when they're using the source. So again, to relate it, they connect pretty easily. The sourcing is definitely much more social studies focused and kind of goes in more on what we're doing with content-based. It's a historical thinking skill. We're using it to add rigor. We're using it to add information or to add to our instruction. We talked about, of course, what sourcing is, when to use it, how to use it, and why to use it, and all that kind of stuff. So that really focused on using documents in class, writing evidence-based arguments like DBQ essays, and we talked about how it relates back to all the different standards, right, for both AP and regular sections. But for this section, we're going to focus mostly on modern and current sources of social media. So again, today is going to be mostly about learning how to research, use academic sources, that kind of thing. But especially next time we'll be talking about media. But again, more current sources. So students are learning how to analyze historical sources using very similar skills as addressing the trustworthiness of modern digital and print sources. So just like we talked about with the previous 2 sessions, a lot of times when you give students information, you give them documents, they automatically just trust it. They're not really going into depth on, oh, is this good, or should I trust this, or should I not, right? We're doing the protocols to have them take those steps, but at first thing, they're just going to take it at face value. Well, it's a similar thing when they do a Google search, right? Like, they just search it, and they're like, okay, great. Here's the first thing that comes up. It's right. And a lot of times, like, exactly. You're like, do you, what?
Use that.
Yeah, exactly. Or it'll come up and it'll be the thing where it doesn't show the website. It just shows, like, the answer, and they don't even take a second to look at what it is. So these 2 sessions are really made to help them understand how to search better and what sources, or how to learn how to trust sources or not trust sources. Because I know we've all been there when you ask your kids to cite your sources, and on one of the sources, it just says google.com. And you're just, and you're just like, sorry, that's a search engine, but like, what are you using? And I don't think I've ever seen a student go past page 1 on their Google search. I don't think I've ever seen it. Okay. And we're going to talk about how, like, janky their searches are anyway. Like, we're going to talk about how to teach them how to do a Boolean search. Just a moment. Getting ahead of myself. So one of the things that's most helpful that I don't think we use a whole lot, especially I know with some of our lower level students, it is a little bit more difficult, but they do have, like, leveled resources within Galileo. You can also, I think, choose Galileo Kids if you need to for lower reading levels. But Galileo is a great resource for scholarly articles. I know any of us who have done grad school or even just college have used Galileo to help find articles. Really? You've never used it? Well, you said you didn't like writing papers anyway, so you're not even a good example. I know I use the heck out of it. I'm going to have to submit a complaint. JSTOR is searched through Galileo. Yeah, that's one of the databases it searches through. Because that's what, I mean, I know for history of, use a ton of JSTOR. Oh, well, I use Galileo, and it will search through JSTOR for you. We have it through Clever. So, like, I know for West Georgia, we have it through, like, the library stuff, and that's when I mostly use it. Like, when I do the research for this presentation in this whole section, I use Galileo to find all my articles. But yeah, and they have, like, different search options you can do, but the kids can click through it. They just go to their Launchpad or Clever, and it doesn't show up as an icon for me. I don't know. I didn't see the kids view, but you can just type it in the search, and it'll come up DCSD Galileo, and they can go to it and search through it. So that's one of the things. I know Google has the option you can click for your search of scholarly articles, but I don't always have a lot of luck with that, and especially if you're trying to have your kids use good sources. Again, I know this might not be for all levels of courses, but I know Miss Scott uses it with the seniors, and then we can use it with maybe as extension activities, or we can use it to kind of level the kids' searches, or maybe just find sources for them. But regardless, Galileo is going to give a good academic search where you're going to have peer-reviewed information you know is true. All right. So the other way we can help our kids learn if sources are helpful, trustworthy, credible, or whatever is using a suffix, right? So we have .com, .gov, .edu, and then .blogspot.com, and then .com. So I just, obviously random, these are not real websites, I just needed a filler word here. So showing students by just looking at the URL to tell, okay, is this going to be a trustworthy source or not, or to rate them, right? So our number one most trustworthy source would be, we would use .gov, because we would assume by this point it had gone through research, it's been approved by the government, so that the information that it's publishing is true. I mean, we would hope in this day and age with our government anyway, maybe not like a North Korean .gov or whatever. But for ours, we're going to try and trust it. The next one would be .edu, because this is going to be from a college, from a school system. So again, we're hoping that it is well researched, that academics have published it, and it's going to be correct factual information. Third most trustworthy we're going to use is .com, because again, we're going to remind our students commerce, maybe not everything is 100% true. They might be trying to sell something, trying to make money, get traffic in there. So .com is definitely on the lower side of the trustworthy, just based on suffix alone. Because I know with our students, sometimes just having like a quick rule is sometimes just that they can snap their fingers and be like, oh, okay, .gov was good. Okay, .com, okay, not so good. And then, of course, the last one would be .blogspot.com. A lot of our kids are not as familiar with what a blog is. I know maybe some guys in here, I know I had a live journal and stuff like that. So blogging was really popular when, or at least when I was younger, but not so much for them. So they're not always exactly sure what a blog is. So explaining that it's basically an online diary, or not necessarily a diary, but it's basically editorial. It's opinion. Maybe there's facts in there. Maybe it's, good. I know there's some blogs that I follow, about politics and stuff. But you need to kind of take it with a grain of salt and explain not everything here is factual. It's kind of the same way I encourage my students to use, if they're going to use Wikipedia, sometimes Wikipedia gives a really great overview of a subject, topic, person, but it's not always super trustworthy because it's not all, while they do work to verify it, I don't allow Wikipedia. It's not an academic source, so whenever they do their projects or research for me, I don't allow it. I allow them, however, to go to Wikipedia and use the sources that are cited. So if they link to another website where the information came from and it was credible, they can. But if the link in a Wikipedia article is to a blog, that is not trustworthy information, right? It would need to link to a .gov, to a .edu, or something like that. So the suffixes can kind of help students just have a quick way to look at something and be like, maybe that's not a good one to use. Okay. All right, the other thing is our students, number one, I don't even think they know what Boolean search means, right? So what we're going to try and do is teach our students how to actually use the search engines. Obviously, the search engines are a huge tool. Most of our kids, I think, go straight to Google, which, again, super helpful. You can find a lot of great stuff on there, but they don't always know how to search. How many times have you given kids an assignment and you look over at their screen and they are typing word for word what the question is? They don't know how to chunk down to the subject to search for stuff within it. When you type in a question verbatim from a worksheet, I guess maybe they're hoping they got lucky that I just yanked it from some teacher on the internet. Yeah, Quizlet, or that it'll come up. But when you're doing an actual project and you're having them do research, right, they need to learn how to search within different terms so that they're able to find things that are going to help them. Okay, so this little graphic here is super helpful. It just kind of goes over how to use and, or, not. Now, most search engines have advanced options so you can add different things in there, but most search engines, just Boolean search style, you can just use these tips and tricks, and it'll help narrow down all of the searches. So the first one is using the word and. When students use the word and, we are including both words or both topics in the search. So it's going to include both. So our Venn diagram here has and it's in the both section. To use or means that it will give us, so the example here is puppy and kitten. So if we search and, we're going to get results for both puppies and for kittens. But if we use or, we're going to get puppies or kittens, maybe a little bit of both. And then if you want to use not, you just want one term. Let's say you're like, okay, I just want to search about puppies. I don't want to hear anything about kittens. So then you would search for puppy, and then you use the word not kitten. So again, like Google, other searches, I know Galileo has advanced search options, so you can kind of select. But as just going forward, using and, or, not, and then of course using quotation marks. Quotation marks is when you're searching for a specific topic. You're like, no, I want this exact topic. I want it spelled this way, and it has to come up exactly like that. Obviously, that might mean our Quizlet searchers are just typing the exact question in with quotation marks now. But yeah, so teaching them not only to learn the suffix of websites about what's going to be more credible just by looking at it without even having to read, and then learning how to narrow their searches so they're getting things that are better or more aligned to what they're looking for, is going to help them find better sources or just more relevant sources. Okay, so how to determine reliability? We want students to use reliable sources, but how do they determine the reliability of a source? So again, this has been our big question, is how do students know, can I trust this? Is this true? How to move forward with the information. So for primary sources, right, it was using the happy chart, learning the historical context, learning who the audience, the purpose, the point of view, and the significance. So they had to do a little bit more research sometimes on who was providing the document or why it was being provided, and maybe that was given kind of in the source context in the beginning or at the end, or maybe they had to look into it depending on the type of activity you were having your students complete. But especially when we're using different sources in our classroom and in our activities, projects usually require some research. They need to know, honestly, beyond just looking at the suffix, can I trust this source? Is this a good one to use? I remember this girl in college had written this essay, and she said, oh, my boyfriend was helping me do this essay, but I told him I wanted to find some sources that went against what I was saying. I was looking for a counter argument, and he was like, oh, I'll help you do the research. And he ended up sending her some of this stuff. The class was about the Holocaust, so you can imagine the sources she got. He was looking up, negating her argument. They were all racist and horrible, but because I think one of them was called, I remember because it was really innocuous sounding, it was called the Historical Review, which if you just hear that, you're like, was just like white nationalist and just pretty terrible. So like when he sent her all these sources, she was like, this is not going to work for me. Like he didn't know how to tell what sources were trustworthy and which were not. So in her paper, she just ended up writing like, did not find any credible, refutable, But it was just like her boyfriend was trying to help and he was trying to be so nice, but he didn't know how to look at a source. And luckily, we were history students together, so she knew what was going on. But uncomfortable to say the least. All right. So I'm going to go over 3 ways to help students go through and check credibility of a website. Some of them are much shorter, and some of them are much longer, so it just depends if you have time. You're probably not going to have your students fill out a chart every time. This will definitely be more of a scaffolding activity because we want to make sure that they're getting the skills and they're able to continue to use it at each level of school, especially if they're going to go on to post-secondary. All right. The first one we've already talked about was civic online reasoning, and that is going to be, that is going to be the 3 questions. And this might be the easiest one to just kind of incorporate when you're speaking aloud, or if you've already kind of gone over these already, because they're the most basic ones. So who's behind the information? So trying to figure out who's published the information, what kind of agenda do they have, right? Especially if you're doing something that has to do with politics. I know with Holmes and I, when we do government and we do projects, sometimes we have to be like, hey, let's talk about what some more neutral sources are. You don't want one that's completely funded by like a conservative think tank or a liberal think tank. We're really trying to go middle of the road here. So who is behind the information? And then what's the evidence? What are they saying are the facts? And then what do other sources say, right? Corroboration was such an important part of our historical documents and our sourcing was figuring out, like, okay, this primary source says this, who backs it up, who refutes it, to tell if you have a reliable, narrator is not the word I'm looking for, but I guess just author or whoever is saying whatever. So this is helping us. What do other sources say? So if you're searching about a Supreme Court case decision and you hear, oh, all this stuff from one side, oh, all this stuff from the other side, right? Trying to find a middle road, trying to find the facts is sometimes difficult, again, especially if something is political. But having that corroboration and seeing what other sources say is very helpful. The next one is, I think, the one that will probably be the most popular with our students. And that is actually the first one, so under the agenda on your paper. And this is the crap. Is your source crap? And in this sense, crap is positive, right? The crappier your source, the better your website. So on your paper, you can see this. And again, all this stuff is posted to our Office 365 share drive folder. So you do have access to all this if you want to use it. Because I don't know, it's high school. They definitely think crap is funny. So the only one that it says currency, and I would just use use the word current, because it's trying to say, like, does it cover current events? Is it current, right? So I know when I do research for college, I try not to use anything that's more than 10 years old, unless I'm specifically like talking about historiography or how things have changed over time. So for our students especially, like, using things that are newer and not super old. I know they like to joke that nothing really changes with history, and it's like, no, the way history is approached is definitely changing, and it has changed, so we need to make sure things are staying current. Or if you're having them do, an activity about economics or with government, right, things change all the time in our, current events. So knowing, kind of telling when things were updated, how old they are, right? So the questions I ask here are, when was the site last updated? What date can you find? And is this current enough? Again, I use the 10-year mark, but I guess it is kind of up to you, right, to give the decision, like the latitude. All right, so our R for crap stands for reliability. Is this information accurate? What is the origin of the information? So again, who is sponsoring that publication? That's going to kind of play into the SHAG activity or questions. So who's sponsoring it? So who's creating it? Does it come from a school or government? Again, there's that suffix there. So if we can teach our students to recognize the suffixes. I didn't include .org just because organizations not always super helpful for, I guess unless you're doing a specific project that requires it. But anyway. And then students have to explain, do they trust the source? Why or yes or no? the authority, so basically who's the author, does this person have any background, what is going on with them, is any of their contact information. So basically this one is kind of more of a checklist. So there's a question where they have to justify whether they actually trust it or not, but most of this is a checklist here for students to go through. So it might be helpful to use on a project. So, okay, I know I've gotten really charty and formatty lately because I like students to know the exact parameters of what I'm looking for. So maybe having like a chart and then having, for a box for a source notes and then having this chart underneath it to decide if it's trustworthy, or maybe just expecting students to do this mentally. I'm going to be honest, mentally probably I would have them definitely at least first check off what they're doing. So the other thing I think is important on authority, if it asks, is there a bibliography citing the website sources used? So many times websites are really bad about providing their sources, especially if they're not from education or government. And if you don't have your sources, you're just kind of just shouting information to the void, like how do we know it's true? And then of course, the purpose is what is the motive of the site. That is going to fit into kind of like what is the agenda here. So does the website seek to inform you and present various sides of an argument or issue? And is the information using neutral language, which is important, especially when we're talking about having like politically charged sources if students are doing government or economic or just any kind of current events. We live in a very politically charged society. There is very, very clear right and left. So having all that, having students kind of identify that is helpful, right? So I got this from the Utah Education Network, and it's just a nice, quick little checklist. And again, asking the students, are your sources crap? They don't know the chart. They might be like, what? No, my sources are good. But once they have the chart, they'll be like, oh yeah, my sources are crap. And anything to be like silly. I know one teacher started using, on her DBQ essays, she would use WTF for where's the facts. But the kids just like, anything that's like slightly edgy. They're like, oh my gosh, my teacher. Anyway, so you will have access to a clean copy of this chart in our Social Studies 365 folder. Our next one, this one definitely takes a little bit more time. So this is on the back of your sheet here. So I've given a clean copy and then the sample that they gave. So I got this from Critical Thinking Consortium, and they have made this chart. So it's definitely more in depth. So maybe this would be better for like an introductory, like when you're teaching them how to go over sources, and CRAP might be easier, kind of like once you've got the basics down. Because this one does seem a little bit more time intensive, but it's assessing the website credibility chart. So you'll see there's four columns overall, but two main sections: reasons for confidence and reasons for doubting. So instead of just highlighting all of the good things or all of the bad things, students actually have to look at both sides and try and get a more neutral view of the website. So they have to identify the authorship, sponsorship, sources, and indicators of care. So authorship, sponsorship, and sources of ideas are things we've kind of covered in the other ones, but I like the idea of indicators of care. So this asks, does the website's presentation style, tone, and format provide clues about the believability of its contents? So asking students to kind of take that extra step to looking into not only the facts that are being presented, but also how such facts are being presented. So again, you're going to have to identify specific evidence from the website. So what are you saying that answers this question here for confidence? So for something you would trust it for. And then what would you say are implications for believability? So why does this evidence inspire confidence in you? The second one, of course, is the same thing, but for doubting. So evidence from the website, and then implications for believability. Is it truthful? Why are we trusting this? Now, down below, we have an actual sample. I thought this was super helpful of them to provide a sample. And you can see that the website they're actually assessing here is a Wikipedia article on Stephen Harper. So it goes through and it fills in each one. Obviously, I think when I would have my students do this, I don't know if I would require complete sentences. I think bullet points would be fine, but they did provide complete sentences under everything, so I think it was helpful. So, let's see, which part do you want to go over? So, for sponsorship, so anyway, they use Wikipedia, so a lot of their stuff is kind of general to Wikipedia, not specific to this one article. But so authorship, our evidence from the website says under the top tab, people have written critiques of the information they think is really one-sided or wrong, and anyone can edit the materials. So our implications for believability is that people are watching what is put on Wikipedia and are making the effort to correct misinformation or mistakes. So for based on who wrote the article, right, they're analyzing, all right, anybody can change it, but it is being updated and changed. So that means people are paying attention and changing things or, updating. However, that same thing could be reasons for doubting. Since there is no formal peer review and no real author of the material, the reader can never be sure that the author is an actual authority on the subject and that all mistakes are caught. So implications for believability is unless researchers use another website to confirm the information, there is no guarantee the information is balanced or correct. Anyone can say anything about the subject. So having students see basically the pros and the cons for each one, at the end of the day, this really kind of takes the cake because you're like, you're right. Author should mean authority, and if you don't know who the specific author is, and if you don't know that they really know their business, right, or if there's no formal peer review where experts have reviewed it, at the end of the day, you can't use that for scholarly work. But like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times my students, I'll be like, okay, Wikipedia can give you a good overview. That's great, use your resources, but you cannot cite Wikipedia. Go down to the bottom and look at the sources, and if you go to their sources and their sources are scholarly, then use those. Like, Wikipedia can be a great tool, but it's not always going to be 100%, right? The second one is sponsorship. So for the reasons for confidence, the About Wikipedia link at the bottom states that the site is run by a not-for-profit parent organization, the Wikimedia Foundation. So implications for believability. A not-for-profit organization means they are not trying to sell you on a point of view for profit. All right? However, same side or other side of the coin, reasons for doubting. The About Wikipedia link discusses that it has a policy of neutrality influenced by founder Jimmy Wales, but Wales revised his own biography, something Wikipedia does not permit. So they're allowing the person who's in charge to make changes which they don't allow for everybody else. So implications for believability is this hurts the believability of the site because anyone, including the founder of Wikipedia, can change information they deem unacceptable to them, right? And I know we've all heard about like internet pranks where people will change things for Wikipedia. I think it was like Sinbad. People kept saying Sinbad was dead, but he was not dead, but people would keep going back and editing it. And if you're going to not allow people to change their own biography, but then allow your founder, you're really kind of taking a nosedive on your credit recovery. Sorry, I'm teaching credit recovery after school. Taking a nosedive on your credibility. All right, next one is sources of ideas. Wikipedia will not allow original research and states that all material must be verifiable. One can also check edits completed by looking at the history tab, and you must have an account. So the implications for believability is that every fact on Wikipedia must be able to be double-checked by someone, and someone cannot be anonymous as they need an account for tracking and accountability. So then on next side, for reasons for doubting, evidence from the website, the About Wikipedia link at the bottom states that the site is run by volunteers. So our implications for believability is the site is so huge that it would be impossible for volunteers to catch every mistake and verify every piece of information that people post. All right. And then our very last one is just indicators of care. So Wikipedia has a table of contents for organization, visuals, graphs, and a few technical mistakes. The style and tone and format strengthen the site's believability as it looks professionally created. However, doubting much of the information, so this one is specific to the Stephen Harper article, had multiple edits and complaints. And this site loses credibility when hundreds of complaints and changes have to be made to the article. So students are essentially filling this out. They're seeing both sides of the coin, and they're going to weigh out on see which one weighs harder. At the end of the day, this one reasons for doubting. If you are doubting the information truly, or you're doubting the process, it's not going to be helpful for academic research. So I think this is a super example to use for students, especially the ones who love to use Wikipedia. But I do think this chart does take time. So this might be for a more scaffolded assignment that you're going to do. So if you're assigning specific sources that you already are familiar with, and maybe having students work in a group to analyze the pros and the cons. But as you get going, having students using the CRAP model is definitely going to be a lot quicker. And then, of course, using the SHAG core questions just as you go are super easy to just kind of implicate as you go. All right. So our next part, here we go. So while doing all the research and reading all the articles to complete my, I guess it's called my culminating project, my professional development. So last semester, I did all my research and I wrote my literature review and I made all these presentations, and this semester obviously I'm responsible for presenting and reflecting and stuff. But I read a lot of articles. I used Galileo and a good Boolean search, and I found a lot of helpful articles, and this comes from one of the ones I used. So it's called Learning to Evaluate Sources, Comparing Teaching Modalities and Student Outcomes. So this one was actually from a bunch of librarians at, I think University of Cincinnati. And essentially what was happening is they were hearing from the professors that incoming freshmen had no idea how to use search, or how to use sources correctly, how to use Boolean search. They didn't know how to do research, and when they were searching, they found that the number one indicator of if they were going to use the website was how it looked. So they did an intervention to go through and talk about how to know which sources to use. And they kind of pushed in to the English classes and held interventions. The whole article was really more about, like, was it helpful to do, like, push-in, in-person, or flipped classroom? That's not super relevant to us. But what they did create was this little research hack chart. So this is the last page of your handout for today. And y'all can see I did not, it's kind of a janky copy because it was color and our printer doesn't like it. But I've been actually kind of fiddling around with making my own. So when I make my own, I'll make it all black and white and maybe a little bit easier for us to use. But anyway, so I want to talk about the different components of this one. So you can see they have keywords to research, again, using not full sentences. So I think I might add a little bit more of like Boolean search, like my little Venn diagram in there to make it a little bit easier. And the other thing is our students, this doesn't really have to do so much with sourcing, but with research, every year I teach them how to use Control F, and they like act like I'm a witch. Like they don't understand how to use it. So especially when they're doing full articles and like searching for keywords and all that, using Control F is a super helpful thing, especially if you're downloading big PDFs. All right. Next section it asks for ask the right research questions. Is this research topic interesting to me? Does the question challenge me or challenge what I already believe in my topic? And can I find enough information? So I like the question, does the question challenge what I already believed about my topic? Because it allows students to have a counter argument, which is always going to add complexity to their essays and to their writings if they can acknowledge both sides and then say which one they think is stronger. And then, can I find enough information? I remember when I was in college, I was like, I'm going to write about Mormon lesbians in the late 1800s. And the answer was no. I was not going to write about them because there was not enough sources about that. So I had to change my whole thing, and I just kind of did a big generalization. It was not my best paper. But anyway, it was the whole thing of I was like researching, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to write about. This is an interesting topic to me. And what I did find was challenging to what I knew, but there wasn't enough information for me to write a 20-page research paper about it. So I had to back out and regroup. And then, of course, does it fulfill the assignment, having students stay on topic? I want to stay up top before I go to the next section. So it also has strategic Wikipedia. So this is also kind of goes over how I talked about use the references, use Wikipedia for the tool that it is, but not as your specific academic source. And then a source analysis quick checklist. So this is going to be very basic, even more basic than using the CRAP checklist there. Asking for the publication, supporting evidence, intended audience, that kind of stuff. So kind of mixing happy and crap together to have a little happy crap sourcing thing. Super helpful. Now the next section is kind of a graphic organizer for them to use for each research or each topic that they're going to be doing. So it allows a spot for research topic, keywords, what do you already know, which I always think is the most important to start with. What your questions are, and what did you learn, and what do you need to explore further. So this one was specifically used for their push-ins, their interventions that they did with the students at University of Cincinnati, with the freshman students, the younger students. Okay. All right. Oh, this is continuing. So again, just to recap what the source analysis activity was, how they asked these questions. They didn't leave a whole lot of space in the actual instrument for them to answer these questions, but I did think it's important that they are acknowledging that these are the important questions. Again, they look super similar to our happy chart, super similar to the iRead and soapstone. We're using those historical thinking skills to scaffold in and help our students as they progress through social studies. And really just throughout high school and into college, because we don't want our kids to be the ones where the university libraries were like, these kids don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to do any sourcing. So hopefully by the time they get out of McNair High School, they know how to use, number one, know how to use Galileo, because unlike some of our colleagues who went to college and didn't use Galileo, we want them to be able to use Galileo, find good research topics or articles, and you'll learn how to search, structure their searches. And then, of course, we want them to also learn how to question their sources, whether they're taking, we all want them, I guess we don't all want them to be historians, but some of them can be historians and go and not shame us in their history classes by learning how to use their sources and accurately analyze primary sources. And then, of course, just general research. So whatever, at any point in McNair High School, they're going to have to do a project, and that project is going to require research. And that research needs to be accurate. It needs to not just be straight up a first Google option or all Wikipedia citing or just typing the exact question into the search bar and hoping to, get it correct there. So having them learn how to analyze this. All right. So, oh, no. Okay, sorry. My computer was going off. I thought it was it. But I do want to apologize that the last page is a little bit blurry. The actual page online update, or when I uploaded it to 360, is a lot easier to see and a lot more clear. But I do want to kind of make a McNair version so where it's a lot easier to use and incorporate. All right. So I have just a few more minutes left. Does anyone have any questions specifically about teaching or using online civic reasoning? I can go over where to access the resources again, or does anyone have any strategies that you've used that have been successful that you want to share? You can use Wikipedia as a jumping off point. Like if you assign a student something, you can be like, okay, this can be your jumping off point. This can be where we start, but not what we're citing.
I tell them, like, if you go to Wikipedia, the sources for Wikipedia
right
at the bottom.
You just click on the sources.
Like, I could change the top part, but I can't change the links at the bottom.
Exactly.
So, and then like you said, when they go to Google, it's like the first drop down box. That's what it said right there. They don't even click the box.
They don't even click the box.
No.
Just take the little bit.
That blurb right there, yeah.
So,
And that's why I think, I know, especially with the ninth graders, we are having a lot of struggles with them being below anticipated or appreciated level. And I think starting this off like scaffolding, like using that big chart to go over, okay, so here's Wikipedia, here's the pros, here's the cons. And again, Dave is pointing out that you can't change the sources. And I don't think that they understand how to click the history and see how many times something has been changed. Especially if it's something more like pop culture-y. Like I said, there's been so many like pranks or like little silly things that have been changed that you can't rely on it. And being able to rely on the source is the whole point of that. I know when we're writing in my AP classes, we have the strict rule of no personal pronouns. No I, no me, no you, no he. Like obviously he or she. No personal pronouns. Like what you think is irrelevant. You're proving everything with facts, and if the sources you're using aren't factual, then you can't use them. So learning to build on facts, learning to back up your arguments, again, we're going to talk next week more about issues that are more common, like politically or like social media and the news and such like that. But one of the biggest, or one of the most helpful things lately has been fact checkers and using things like Snopes to figure out, like, oh, okay, no, this was proved false, or oh, okay, this is, whatever. I don't know. The importance of truth and of fact, I think, needs to be reiterated a lot. And then having these tools allows students to understand how those things are actually done and how you analyze for them and choose your sources that you need. Okay, so my last thing will be, if you don't mind doing my QR code, it's also on your paper. Just filling out that handy dandy little feedback link. You will help me out so much. And then we'll do this again 1 week from today. And then we will only attend McNair PLs after this point. So I appreciate you so much for coming and staying. It's been really helpful and supportive and just really kind, honestly. So I hope they've been helpful. I know that I think I've grown a lot using sourcing and learning how to teach this better. So that was my TEKS goal for this year. So I'm happy to say I think I have reached my TEKS goal. I don't remember what it's called. Is it called like the Cal? I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much. And again, all this stuff is posted in our folder, so you can access it there. And then I will keep working on adapting the University of Cincinnati tool into something that we can use for all classes. I think that would be nice to have an instrument for that. So thank you so much.